Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the VOR podcast. Is it a podcast? Is it a live show? Who knows? Can't put me in a box. What we decided to do for this podcast was air the TikTok live show from Sunday, July 23rd, where I did a live reaction video to the Y-Files' new Moon Landing Hoax video. Was he promoting the conspiracy, or was he debunking the conspiracy? I kind of assumed they were controlled opposition, or he was controlled opposition, but anyways, I wasn't sure. So we decided to do a live watch party. During these live shows, we usually get 8 to sometimes 30,000 total viewers, and it's a really good opportunity to engage in real time with the general populace. Atheists, believers, science lovers, science deniers, whatever. One of the individuals in the comment section that I'm engaging with is a physicist named Jorge that I've debated on the live show before. Really nice guy, kind of agnostic, but a scientist. So Jorge provided an opportunity for me to give my take on some questions that I get asked quite a bit. Questions that you might want answers to, about NASA, about science. I'm personally skeptical that America was able to go to the moon, land, fly back home safely in the 1960s. I'm just not sure we had the technology back then. Or maybe now, but I'm not married to it. It's just kind of where I'm at. I'm skeptical they went. So I get to cover that in this show and answer some really important questions, including my take on the history of the secular scientific bias. So hopefully you have a few hours to hang out and listen as I do a live reaction to the Y-Files' new video. Is he a trustworthy source, or is he controlled opposition? Thank you for watching. I think we're all ready. True Earth man, you're gonna like this one. Okay, my stance on the moon landing. I think that NASA is basically Babylonian astronomers. I think they use tax money to tell the world that there is no God. Fun. We looked deep into the cosmos and we saw there was no God, and we're reporting back to you. You can just trust the science. So this is the Y-Files, and it is the premiere of their movie called something about the moon hoax. Did the moon landing actually happen? And I'm pretty sure he's gonna say no, because he is, he's like full-on aliens guy, X-Files guy. He's not a Christian. Giants, but they were like alien giants or something. But anyways, yeah, he's gonna cover the moon hoax. And my guess, I think he's a pretty good journalist. I'll give the Y-Files guy that. I don't think he's very interesting. I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I think he's whatever. I think it's pretty good content. I think it's great that I get 400 views on a video and he gets 400 million. I guess there's a little bit of jadedness in this. Probably. Ciao. But if he does a decent job, so for those of you that don't know, content creators, we're basically the media. We're basically the media at this point. We are journalists reporting on things through our bias, which the system hates, which is why they want to shut down TikTok and they just want to control the narrative. So I think Y-Files guy is kind of, I think he's that Joe Rogan level conspiracy theorist, where it's like, yeah, the CIA is a clandestine intelligence operation. Breaking news. Did you know that? They totally do coercion and espionage. It's crazy. Oh, big one. It's but the other day he did one and it was how did life begin? 4.5 billion years ago. Single cells, something happened and then evolved into multiple cells, and just gave this full Darwinian breakdown.
The story of humans began a long time ago. 3.5 billion years ago, protein molecules floated around the ooze called the primordial soup. Then something happened and a molecule made a copy of itself. And then another copy, and another. And soon these molecules arranged themselves into something called a cell. Then the cells clumped together and multiplied, and organisms were created. And over the next 3 billion years, the organisms became more complicated and more diverse. 375 million years ago, one of those organisms crawled out of the sea. 4 million years ago, hominids emerged. Hominids had large brains. They could think, they could reason, communicate, and cooperate. 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, modern humans, appeared. They developed agriculture, organized into civilizations, and became masters of the planet. The story of humans began a long time ago.
Full-on Darwin promotion. So anyways, in my opinion, he is basically controlled opposition. He's the guy who can ask questions, but not the real questions. So the system's behind him, oh yeah, here you go, people who believe in conspiracies, you get this whitewashed version. This is what I think the guy is, so not that I'm biased. But anyways, so I think number one way he could do this is he could be like, so we questioned the moon landing. Kubrick totally did this. And it's like, presents the information. And at the end of it, he goes, you know what, guys? We need to be critical thinkers here. They probably did go to the moon. We know this because of the retroreflectors and blah, 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 blah. Like Mythbusters, like 2023 version, like what their show was. I think he could do that. I think at the end of it, he could go, it's not really a hoax. They went, and they're going again. Or he could actually kind of let this one out, let out of the bag. And I hope he covers the good stuff. The other thing he could do is cover the like ridiculous conspiracies and not the good conspiracies. I think that's another option. Okay, let's watch it. I'll stop talking. Here we go. I don't know what the video is called yet. Hopefully it'll say here in a minute. Let's turn up the volume a little bit. I am going to be pausing it in between though. You're going to get some VOR takes here because I can't sit here quietly. If I'm getting triggered, you're going to know about it, y'all. I'm going to bump my face over just a scooch to the right so you could see my stupid face. Maybe less chatty. What do you guys think? Is that better? A moon landing hoax. Yeah, I know he did, John. That's why I told him to come check this out, because he called me about it. He got a lot of flack on that video, and we were talking about it. There's some things you can't touch, and this is one of them. Wow, wow. This is slow. Oh, that came quick. Never mind.
This episode of the Y-Files is brought to you by PBS Debt. Stanley.
Morzy, you say you really like this guy's content. You must have not been here, but I think he's controlled opposition. I think he's the vanilla conspiracy guy version of the X-Files and Joe Rogan. Just like a version of it, but not like the real hitting stuff, because he's always pushing evolution, and I think there's a chance that at the end of this, he's like, why would you believe it's a hoax? It's actually science. Or he could say it's a hoax, and either way, I'm excited to see. It's 45 minutes long. Stop talking.
Kubrick is considered one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Of his 13 movies, a few are considered classics. But in 1968, Kubrick released 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is more than a classic, it's a masterpiece, and widely regarded as one of the best science fiction films of all time, and probably the most influential. This collaboration with science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke tells the story of an alien intelligence that visited Earth in the distant past.
I didn't make it very far. All right, let's see if I can find this here. Arthur C. Clarke, NASA Access. Let's see if this is on this video. No. Arthur C. Clarke, super atheist. Yeah, see now playing. Super atheist. When he wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, he basically discloses that the whole point of the movie was proving evolution, proving Darwin. That was like his whole thing. I need to talk to you about Arthur C. Clarke for a minute, and I'm going to play this video to show my point. The Making of a Myth. Isn't this amazing? This is an actual movie, documentary supporting the building of 2001. It's totally an accident. So the Washington Post, their slogan is "Democracy dies in darkness," and I think that the topical meaning there is that it's like they keep it alive by exposing things. But since it's basically controlled narrative, official narrative, cancel culture, censorship, it's like, are you saying what you're doing here, Washington Post? You're killing democracy in your lies and your darkness? I would say yes. This is 2001, The Making of a Myth. Well, we'll see if Y-Files guys talks about it. Most films are made in 2 years. This took almost 5. And they filmed it and released it almost concurrently with the moon landing. And their footage of their moon landing is better than the actual moon landing. And so Kubrick, as the ultimate filmmaker, would have been the guy. This is 2001, The Making of a Myth. Yeah, like the biggest, greatest myth ever that we went to the moon and Kubrick pulled it off? Maybe. Anyways, watch this. see if you think that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing in this stead.
He wanted to make the proverbial good science fiction movie.
Do you see the monkey there? His whole monkey thing and the humans killing the monkeys at the end, I think it's in this documentary. Maybe I'll try and find it on the side. Arthur C. Clarke is what's called a humanist. Humans can become God. Kurzweil's one, etc. Arthur C. Clarke, in this documentary, was telling the story of evolution. And it's interesting that he brings in AI, and AI kills man, right? It's so profound. 2001, 9/11 happened in 2001. Some really serious, like, generational things being done here. But anyways, he came out and said it's the story of evolution, Darwinian evolution. We are animals. And who caused us to go from animal to human? Well, this is fucking AI something. Space, ghosts, demons, something. Right? Prometheus isn't that much of a different story. But this black monolith was a tribute to their god. And very dark. Arthur C. Clarke was very dark. And this is a very dark thing. So, that's not what I was even going to cover. Watch what happens here.
Implying that there hadn't been any good ones before then. I didn't agree with him. There had been some good ones. Fantastic.
That he had been.
Voyager's one. And I was rather fond of Things to Come.
Superhumanist atheist.
Version of H.G. Wells's book. And I got Stanley to see it, and he thought it was absolutely terrible. And of course, it was very nice.
Kubrick was a genius.
If it was science fiction to imagine a rocket being fired at the moon, the scientific facts of the early 1960s seemed even more unbelievable. America's first real rockets were blowing up on their launch pads, and the Soviet Union was dominating space. 90 minutes. How far ahead were they in the nuclear race? America was galvanized into action. President Kennedy commanded NASA with the promise of almost unlimited funds to achieve what seemed then an impossible task.
Oh, seems like a good place to stop. Give you a little VOR take. Russia's in space already. No surprise. And because they're very mechanically minded and fearless, and they were kicking ass, and they were up there. They had a lady astronaut up there. If you haven't heard that story, I played it in one of my songs with my band. Very upsetting. Their last voice of her burning up on re-entry. It's really terrible. They had a monkey in there. They flew the first thing to space, to the moon. America sucked. They needed to steal all the Germans and bring over and do Operation Paperclip to even build a Saturn V rocket that was somewhat compelling, and that's tied to Jack Parsons and Jet Propulsion's laboratory and Martin Marietta, and he was a super occultist working with Aleister Crowley and probably getting his information from demons through the Thule Society and Nazi Germany and all these things. Very, very, very complicated things going on here with space. So I said it's Babylonian space magic earlier. Well, anyways, they weren't going to get to the moon, okay? And Russia was going to beat them. It was 1963. They had no chance. And NASA gets unlimited funds by JFK, who at that point is like probably playing ball before Operation Northwoods and Linus Lemnitzer and how that whole thing went down poorly, ending in his head being blown off in this here scaled down version of the car. Anyways, unlimited funds for NASA to make it look like we went to space. And they hired Kubrick and the greatest science fiction writer ever and pulled off the miracle. Making of a Myth, 2001. Watch this little clip and tell me if your alarm bells go off here.
Against this highly political backdrop, Kubrick and Clarke set out, in their movie 2001, to predict the future of space exploration. His close connections with NASA gave Clarke privileged access to the design and construction of real space hardware.
We're in the final assembly building of the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module, which will take 2 American astronauts down to the surface of the moon. And in 2001, Stanley Kubrick and I have set ourselves several objectives. We hope to convey to the public the wonder and beauty and promise of the new age of exploration which is opening up before the human race. We want to convey the message that our Earth is perhaps not the only abode of life.
Okay, Arthur C. Clarke. Let's recap that. So Arthur C. Clarke, we have been given unparalleled access to NASA's secret inner chambers. We're in here. We got access to LEM. We can see all these things. It's definitely not because we're filming them or getting, very detailed 3D pictures of them, and so we could use them for our special effects. No, see, we're in here because I'm a science fiction writer, And I want to tell everybody that the Earth isn't special. Science. The Earth isn't special. It's a pale blue dot in the middle of a meaningless universe. And there's aliens. And they probably made us. And we should worship them. Arthur C. Clarke. He's just in NASA. I'm given unparalleled access. Unparalleled access to have this all I would ever want to. Look at this. Look at this. He's in NASA.
Against this highly political backdrop, Kubrick and Clarke set out, in their movie 2001, to predict the future of space exploration. His close connections with NASA gave Clarke privileged access to the design and construction of real space hardware.
His close connections with NASA. Arthur C. Clarke is a novelist. What is that? His Arthur C. Clarke, you know, because I'm in the media. My close connections at NASA. His close connections at NASA gave him unparalleled access because he's working with Stanley Kubrick to tell the world, to try to convince the world that we flew to the moon, because he's a great filmmaker and Arthur C. Clarke's a great writer. You kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Let's read that one. Let's hear that one more time.
Clear race. Construction of real space hardware.
Sorry.
Against this highly political backdrop, Kubrick and Clarke set out, in their movie 2001, to predict the future of space exploration. His close connections with NASA gave Clarke privileged access to the design and construction of real space hardware.
Childhood's end. Is that one crazy one with the end demon thing? Can somebody confirm? Childhood's end. Ending. Ending. Soon the Overmind will arrive, and the Earth will be destroyed as the children join the Overmind. This is Arthur C. Clarke. While the Overlords prepare to leave, Jan decides to stay on the Earth as he watches the Overmind arrives and absorbs the children. In the process, the children consume the Earth's crust, causing it to explode. It's like this demon guy. I need to watch it, but it's this demon guy that comes out at the end. Everybody's like, it's like Baphomet. I think he's got horns and stuff. I think he's like the. It's just not. Everything you were taught is wrong. Okay. You live in a world where Babylonian space magicians and humanist pro-alien demon evolutionist story writers have access to NASA because they have connections at NASA. What does that mean, his connections at NASA? Work together to build the moon landing and make you believe it. And if you question it today, you're like a heretic of the religion of science. Get out of here. Listen how this ends.
We're in the final assembly building of the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module, which will take 2 American astronauts down to the surface of the moon. And in 2001, Stanley Kubrick and I have set ourselves several objectives. We hope to convey to the public the wonder and beauty and promise of the new age of exploration, which is opening up before the human race. We want to convey the message that our Earth is perhaps not the only abode of life.
We're here to convey the message that the Earth isn't popular or isn't special, and we're just aliens on our own planet, and aliens are going to come eat us or whatever. Anyways, very deep stuff here. Now back to the movie.
And left behind artifacts in the solar.
Here we go.
Tells the story of an alien intelligence that visited Earth in the distant past and left behind artifacts in the solar system. The movie features groundbreaking special effects which still hold up today. In fact, the effects looked so good that the movie gave the American government an idea. Billions of tax dollars were invested in the space program, but the Soviets were still years ahead of the United States. NASA desperately needed to get to the moon before Russia, but they knew it was impossible. So they turned to one of the world's best filmmakers for help. Because when it came to the moon, if they couldn't make it, they'd fake it.
I don't know where he's going to go with this. Everything I've seen about the guy, he's the Walmart version of this. He marginalizes everything true that I've seen, and he's just like, the world loves him. It's like, oh, you're debunking conspiracies. I think he's becoming a conspiracy debunking channel. But anyways, I would like to hear from the chat here. Can somebody create a poll, a mod? Chloe, are you in here? And ask. I'd like to make a predict. I'd like to see what you guys think. Is this the poll would be if there's a mod in here? Is this guy going to say that Kubrick actually filmed it? So something like agrees Kubrick faked it, or dismisses the conspiracy at the end? Can a mod do that for me? I'm not getting an answer from a mod. Well, no, don't just put it in here. I want to see it on a poll. Moore says no.
From the moment that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot on the moon on July 20th, 1969, rumors were circulating that the whole thing was faked.
Did you guys hear recently that whole quarantine bit they did, where they like set all of the astronauts in like a pod somewhere, and they like built this quarantine area, and they had President Nixon talking to them through the wall? Yeah, Nixon, this is totally legit. And he's like, hey, astronauts, I'd love to talk to you, but I can't get space flu. And it just came out that was faked. They're like, but the moon landing still happened, just that was faked.
That's because it was faked.
Yeah, I know you believe that.
I believe it because it's true.
Well, we're gonna explore the theory, but
It's not a theory. The moon landing was fake.
Yeah, but can you be quiet for 1 minute while I set this up, please?
Fine, fine. Go ahead. Set up your theory.
Thank you.
It was fake.
Science journalist Richard C. Hoagland wrote in his 2007 book Dark Mission that he saw NASA press officers helping distribute flyers to the press saying the landing was faked. Even though the astronauts brought back hundreds of moon rocks and took thousands of photographs of the moon, some people simply didn't believe it. Considering the technology of the time, going to the moon and back sounded like science fiction. At one point, almost 30% of the American public believed the moon landings had been faked, and this started to show up in pop culture.
You know why they believed it? Because people are very intuitive. Let me tell you something about the system. The system tells you can't trust your intuition. The universe created itself, bingo bongo, which that kind of shit happens. The universe got better over time. Life created itself, bingo bongo. We got better over time. People are like, no, I don't believe that. I actually don't believe that I'm a chimpanzee and that the universe created itself. It's like, well, you're stupid. 60% of the people didn't believe that Oswald killed Kennedy. Yeah, people's intuition. Yep, the story doesn't line up. This is where they really started popularizing conspiracy theorists. You're a conspiracy theorist. Yes, we went to the moon. Yes, Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy. And if you don't believe that, you're a conspiracy theorist. And then they just wait out those people to die. Eventually they die. And then they write down in the history books their version that they want pushed. And that's your history. So yeah, 30%. I think at least 40% of Russians today don't believe it. And the head of their once head of their Russian NASA Cosmosis or whatever it's called just came out and was like, yeah, totally didn't go. And whenever I ask about it, everybody's like, don't say anything or America will stop being our friend and then it'll be bad and we need their money or something. So, all right, go.
In the 1971 movie Diamonds Are Forever, there's a sequence where Sean Connery as James Bond breaks into a warehouse. And there he finds government agents filming a fake moon landing sequence. He steals a weird-looking moon buggy to escape.
Too cool.
Ugh, that thing is almost as ugly as the Tesla Cybertruck.
A few years later, the movie Capricorn 1, starring James Brolin and O.J. Simpson, was released.
Oh, did O.J. find the real killers yet?
Not yet.
Well, I'm sure they're hiding on a golf course out there somewhere.
And Capricorn 1 told the story of a fake mission to Mars.
As millions all over the world watched and listened, the President of the United States spoke to the astronauts across
We're on Mars.
There's only one small catch. It never happened. It's all a lie.
So because of these and other high-profile references, the idea of a fake moon landing conspiracy really took off in the 1970s.
Yep, definitely wasn't intuition.
Had the best movies, the best music.
The conspiracy faded in the 80s, but the internet helped it make a comeback in the late 1990s. By the mid-2000s, the idea that the moon landings had been faked caught on with millennials who weren't alive for the Apollo missions. An extremely popular documentary was the Bart Sibrel film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
Oh, isn't that the guy that got punched out by Buzz Aldrin?
My brother and I, Pete, he's in here. We watched that on Fox in about 98, I want to say, maybe 2000. It was before the internet, really. That's when I watched it, and I was just like, Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't believe it anyways. Yep. We can go. Bart Sabell's the guy that Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin or somebody punched out. That guy.
That's the guy.
You really like it? You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Oh, see?
Ooh, that old timer can really throw hands, huh?
He sure could. But to be fair, Sabrell had been chasing Buzz around with a camera, badgering him to swear on the Bible that the moon landing was real. Buzz...
Holly, I would gladly debate your husband about it. Two things. We're doing this. That's one. And the other thing is I'm on TikTok studio mode, and I can't accept guests. So, Holly, can we do it another time? I'm agnostic atheist on it. I don't believe we went, but I don't know. But yeah, I would debate him. I would love to debate him about it. I love that debate. But for now, I can't do it, so we're doing this. But if he wants to stick around till afterwards, I'll try to be done in like an hour from now, and we'll do it.
Begged the guy
I'll
to
leave
back
and
off,
come back.
which he didn't. Finally, Sabrell called him a liar and a coward, and he got a knuckle sandwich for his trouble. So the moon landing conspiracy was back, and popping up all over American pop culture.
They just start making stuff up. Yeah. Like that Neil Armstrong guy. Have you seen him on the talk shows? Neil Armstrong? You mean the first man to walk on the moon? Talk about a fish story. Yeah. Man, and they're buying it. Oh, yeah.
And when Joe Rogan started questioning the moon landing, that exposed the theory to a huge new audience.
Joe who?
Joe Rogan, comic, podcaster.
Between 1969 and 1972, they had seven attempts, 6 of them successful. That was the only time in history that a human being has been more than 400 miles above the Earth.
Jorge, good to see you, brother. The moon landing, being agnostic on the moon landing isn't a calling card of mine. I am skeptical, but I don't know one way or another. This is a television show or a show on YouTube called The Y-Files. I'm not a huge fan, but it's kind of conspiracy-y. And so they're premiering tonight the moon hoax thing. I think he's probably going to say we did go, but that's one of the things I'm asking in the chat. So we're watching the video. I'm giving my take, just so you know what's going on here. I'm not like starting an anti-moon landing channel or anything. Anyways, here we go.
Earth's surface.
Although I'm skeptical that we went.
Never heard of him.
400,000 people worked on the Apollo project. 600 million people watched the moon landing live.
That's a lot of people watching that live. No way they were had.
If this is a hoax, it's the greatest hoax in history.
Yes.
Bold claims require bold evidence.
After the theory
Is there
of evolution.
evidence that the moon landing was faked? Lots of it.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question.
The motivation for faking the moon landings was driven by several factors. The United States was under tremendous pressure to get to the moon before the Soviets. The Soviet Union had already proven they were far ahead of the U.S. in space technology.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And
I don't plan to do full, engaged debate about it, but let me tell you my take on that, Jorge. If we didn't go, and my main reasons for thinking that at least that I'm agnostic on it, is that we didn't have the technology in 63, and then we did by 69, and we haven't had the technology since. You get some major issues, like 3 ladies with sewing machines built the first spacesuits, and they're going to spend $1 billion in 18 years on the next spacesuit, if they ever get it done. If we go to the moon, okay, modern technology, which is going to be at least probably 60, 70 years later, whatever, by the time they actually go. If we go again with AI and, the digital revolution and vastly better solar equipment and technology for communication, etc. If we go again and we land there and there's some sort of legitimate video of them seeing the actual landing site, I'll let it go. You know what I'll say? Check that out, they went. That's what I'll say. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It's kind of cool. It's a cool idea to think that they went. But there's issues with them having gone. There's issues. And the thing is, you said it's an offense to the people who helped. I don't think it is, because I think if it was faked, everybody had to believe they were doing it, right? Very compartmentalized. You would have had, I don't know, let's just say a couple dozen, maybe less than 100 people that would have actually been in on it. Everybody else was making toilets and engines and motors and thermo, heating and cooling and power supplies. They were making these things. Real engineers doing their part. The thing about this is, when you're trying to control the information, you would have needed, basically, to have the people in Houston and the people on the moon really in this thing. Everybody else, you want to... I remember having a debate with one of the guys I used to work with, World War II guy, and I worked on that thing, and I built a blah, blah, and I asked him about this. He was one of the guys I managed at a golf course. What did you do? Well, we built it was some sort of sound thing, something in acoustics. I don't know what it was. And I said, okay, yeah, you submitted it, and how did you test it? They did a thing, and blah, blah. I'm like, okay, and you saw the final product? No, I didn't see the final product. We just engineered it. Like, at one point, the chain of custody here is in question, right? So, if they did fake it, I think you have a very well-motivated thing. It was good that we aren't Russia today. We had to win the Cold War, and that was a thing. It was a pissing contest. And, we had Hollywood. And we had the media. And we didn't have rockets. And we didn't have the technology. So from a thought experiment scenario, it would have been easier to fake it than it would have been to actually go. Jorge, can you concede me this point? Would it have been easier to fake flying to the moon, uncoupling, landing, shooting back out, getting reconnected, and then flying back and landing safely? Would it have been easier to go or to fake going? And at that level, it becomes a viability. And then from there, you want to go to the evidence. Well, what evidence is there? It's scant. There's a dearth of evidence. The only real evidence that's compelling is that you can bounce a laser light off the moon. And they say that's because you aim it at the highlands and you get the bounce off the retro reflectors, the laser reflectors. That's the only piece of evidence. That's actually the only piece of evidence. Because you shouldn't be able to bounce light off the moon. But I debunked that in one of my videos last year, a year and a half ago. Smulin and Fiocco, physicists, I believe, bounced laser lights, photons, 400 billion photon lights shot at a laser, coupling shot at the moon, and they received light back prior to the moon landing. I covered it on my video. Smulin and Fiocco, you could look it up. They actually got light back from the moon, because the moon is a huge reflector. I believe God made it to refract the light from the sun. The moon is a reflector, so yes, you could bounce light off the moon before the retroreflectors. After that, the only evidence, the only photographs are from NASA. There's never been any evidence provided outside of NASA, China, Russia, your backyard telescope. They can't even find it with Hubble. They can't, because it's too, it's just a different kind of optics. So you're basically literally taking NASA's word for it. And when you look at what they have in the game, when you look at the amount of money that went into this, you could just make the defense that we needed to convince the world that we went, and NASA needed to cover up all the money that they blew. You could make that defense. Anyways, that's kind of where I'm at. Jorge, you say we put a reflector and we took pictures of landing sites a couple years ago. We did not, Jorge. We did not. Kind of. NASA did. NASA did with the only way you can take a picture of the landing site, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the LRO. NASA satellite that's in orbit around the moon took a picture and sent it back. Yep. From NASA. The only evidence we have, I said, is from NASA. And it's going to be. It's from NASA. The only evidence is from NASA, Jorge. The only evidence that we went to the moon is rocks from NASA, pictures from NASA, pictures from their satellites. It is okay, yeah, if you trust NASA, and I don't. And you know why I don't trust NASA, largely. I've been saying it's Babylonian space magic. It's the Babylonian astronomers. It's nothing new. They control the narrative of what space is. Fuck the Big Bang, can't question it. Well, that's wrong. They just tell you, they have to tell you what the universe is. Yes, the only proof of God is from the Bible. Yes, Jorge, exactly. Thanks. That's exactly right. Are you skeptical of the moon? Or can I say to you, no, God is real because the Bible says it. Yes, NASA and Bible are the same thing. They're both belief systems. Where do you put your faith? You exactly made my point. I am also agnostic of the Bible. I believe it, but I don't know. I'm an agnostic theist. As it relates to the moon landing, I'm an agnostic skeptic. You could call me an agnostic atheist as far as believing we went. I feel like the burden of proof is on them, and I haven't been provided the amount of evidence, largely based on my justification that I just gave, which is that we didn't have the technology, and we needed to win, and we had more technology to make it look like we went. And when we go, if they go again, I'm 45, like I need them to get out there pretty soon here. They're putting this off to 2025, 2030, it's just going to keep being pushed back. I don't know if they ever go, but if Artemis goes, and we have some sort of legitimate documentation, not like we landed there and here's a picture. I mean, like, whatever, time lapse, get there, fly over the thing. It's exactly. If it's convincing enough to me, like I've said, I'll go. Shit, they did it. What ingenuity? What ingenuity they showed. That was, boy. If you believe you can do something, and you have some moxie, you can do just about anything. But in the meantime, I'm skeptical, and I'm not a flat earther. I very much believe the Earth is a globe. I think flat Earth might actually be devised by and perpetuated by NASA, partially to cover their tracks. I have a very complicated belief system. I think flat Earth is NASA misinformation. Sorry, flat earthers. I love you. Love everyone, but I think it's a globe Earth. It's not a science problem, it's an engineering problem. I totally agree. I mostly agree. I mean, I think the Van Allen radiation belt is a science problem. I guess that's an engineering problem. I don't know. I don't know what solar radiation looks like without the protection of the electromagnetic field. I don't know. I don't know if anybody does, because hard to tell. Hard to tell. Your dad's a pilot, he said it's flat. My good friend's a pilot, he says it's a globe. So, there's that. Okay, let's get back to this. Go.
It is one of the great adventures of all time.
I love the way Kennedy spoke.
Which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind.
The Soviet Union put the first man-made object in orbit with Sputnik 1 in 1957. They put the first animal in space when Laika the dog was launched with Sputnik 2.
Okay, it's okay. If everybody's here to watch this video and not have me talking and being TikTok-y, you'll see the video. It's probably already over. This is not my YouTube show. This is very casual. What is said is that the comment reads, so why can't we go to the moon if it's a globe? The idea that space is fake is it's not a good one. I'm trying to be nice here. This is why I think NASA created flat Earth. The idea that space is fake it's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Flat earthers are like, you're the same as the evolutionists. I get it. I've got a telescope. I've looked at the moon. I can't see Mars and Jupiter because I don't have a good enough telescope, and the bugs will eat you alive out here even at night. But I've got 2 or 3 amateur astronomers that I follow on here. One of them is a guy that comes in my live quite a bit, and he's an astronomer, and he looks at Saturn and the moons of Saturn and Jupiter all the time on his channel. You just watch him look at it. It's not a dome with water on the outside. And that's not what's stopping us. What's stopping us is that God made the earth for us to inhabit and not travel off of. Can we do it at some point? Like Jorge said, when we get our engineering together? Maybe. Maybe in the next 100 years, we will have the technology with AI actually trying to help us solve some of these problems, and we'll actually go, maybe. But did they go in 1969? I'm skeptical that we had the technology. You have to leave the Earth, and our gravity's substantial. Then the way God made it, there's no resources in space, that's the other side of solar energy. There's no oxygen, there's no water, there's no food. So you have to take oxygen, water, and food. And you have to take fuel. Especially in 1969. They had to take fuel. And the problem with taking fuel is that fuel weighs a lot. Liquid weighs 8 pounds to the gallon. So every pound of fuel you have to bring fuel to propel the fuel you're bringing. See the problem? Now, it's not a 1-to-1. It's not like you need to add a pound worth of engineering for the pound, but you end up with like a, whatever the number is, Jorge might be able to tell you, 80%. Well, 80% is a lot when you're talking about 100,000 gallons of anything. That's 800,000 pounds. How many, Jorge, if you look at some of the problems, have you ever looked at this? I looked deep into this. You know the kind of researcher I am. It is 240 degrees below zero or something in space. That is fucking cold. Okay? If you've ever... We live in northern Maine, and it gets to like 30 or 40 below. And if your power goes out, which happens here, right now we burn a bag of pellets a day, and we have oil furnace. When you have the power go out here in a 40-degree day, in 2 hours your house is at freezing or below. And in 4 hours, your pipes start bursting and you're in deep if you can't start a fire. Legitimately. Up here. You could go from a temperature of 74 degrees in your house to ambient outside temperature within 24 hours. You have to keep the astronauts warm in a can for 2 weeks at minus 240 degrees. And that's exactly one half of the problem. The other half of the problem is the sun touches things, and I think it's like 250 degrees. The climate control issue, and I've looked into their HVAC system and the way that they say they heated and cooled. With a car, we use the engine heat, and we have pulleys, and we have... None of that was on there. Batteries, and super magic space heater and AC. Very, very problematic. There's very serious engineering problems. Why did we can't go to the moon because the Earth's flat? No, because it's hard to go to the moon. Okay? It's 250,000 miles away. That is, most cars, you could drive a car for 25 years, 10,000 miles per month. No, 1,000 miles per month. And it would take you 25, 30 years, whatever, 20 years, whatever the number is. And everywhere you've ever driven, and it's 250,000 miles. And that's one way to the moon. You got to come back. There's space debris. There's miniature shrapnel. There's UV, ultraviolet radiation, that isn't protected by our miracle of a magnetic field, which I believe the firmament actually is. Part of it, anyways. We don't know what happens outside of the Van Allen radiation belt. In theory, 1,000 or 1,000,000 X radiation. None of them got cancer. Nobody got burned. Just aluminum cans, steel. When you look at the engineering, I think this is why they haven't gone. I think the estimations that I'm hearing is they need 12 inches of steel to protect from the solar radiation. And the astronauts, like one of them were asked, "Did you get fried by the radiation?" They're like, "What radiation? There wasn't no radiation in our studio." The engineering problem, Jorge, of how thick the steel would need to be to not be eviscerated and nuked by the solar radiation is an engineering issue, because then you got to figure out how to propel that. Then they had to slingshot around one planet and slingshot around another, and then come to a stop, and then drop off and land in the right place, and then take the fuck off. Have you ever seen the video of that? Ready for this? Has anybody seen this? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's fine if you want me to believe this. I get it. It's better than... We don't have biblical images, so I get it. But you're telling me that these yahoos are in this box on the moon, getting ready to take off, and on the Earth... Let's look at something here. Let's see here. Let's look for reference here. Space shuttle taking... Oh, not. Space shuttle taking off. It could be any rocket, but... This is what it looks like leaving the Earth. This is what it takes to get off the Earth. Now, I understand the gravity is 6 times stronger. And we have an atmosphere. And so, in my feeble mind, I anticipate seeing about 1/6 of this with the moon landing, or the moon leaving the Earth.
11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, start, 2, 1, boost ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery.
Look at the speed.
Space station paving the way for future missions beyond.
Beautiful cinematography, absolutely stunning. Amazing. Yeah, I agree, Jorge. You obviously have the resistance of the atmosphere, which is basically water. I get that. But still, this is what it looks like leaving the Earth. This is leaving the Earth, right? Just a phenomenal sight. Now, let's look at them leaving the moon. Which, obvious problem here, Jorge, is who filmed this. I covered it. You know I do deep research. Their story is they had it set up on a thing, on a PTZ, basically a digital PTZ, and that there was an operator at Houston. You ready for this? That the operator at Houston panned up. An auto remote camera on the moon, and that the operator from Houston panned up at a 2.5 second, 5 second delay. Because the image had to get from the moon to the Earth and then back to the moon. 5 second delay. Ready?
Mission arm is empty. Okay, I'm going to get the pro. 99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good. Ag thought. Pitch over. Here you have good thrust. Okay, 30 seconds.
It is not rad. It's crappy pyrotechnics and it's 60s, 70s text. 70s tech. Look, here it goes. It's a little bit of goofy flashes. What's happening? Jorge, why isn't the dirt being disturbed? I'm not proud. I don't believe it. I'm not proud. I don't believe it. I'm not going to pretend to believe it. I get it. If we did it, that's cool. But why isn't there... When we watched this, if this was done on Earth, and instead of being on this concrete pad designed for the dissipation of all of this energy, you would have had... If this was on dirt, they would have dug a tremendous hole. This would have dug... Look at all the exhaust coming out of the pad that they're in there. And instead, there's no dust kicked up, a couple fireworks, and perfect auto pan. Get out of here. And the auto tracking thing, you can say it, I get that. That's not what happened. According to the official narrative, there was an operator at Houston that did a manual pan. That's the official story. Watch this pan. Watch the pan. And tell me how with a 5 second delay they got this right.
3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston.
Show me the 5 second delay.
Ag thought.
What?
Pitch over.
Hey, we did it. You saw moon dust flying, yes. You saw a little bit of a... I bet you that thing was... I bet you it was like this big. You saw a little bit. They did a really crappy job with that. Ready for this one? Here's a VOR prediction / let's see how this ages. If they go to the moon and they decouple and they hit the air brakes... I'm kidding. I know it's jets. Like they use the jets and the micro adjustments, whatever. And they come in at the right angle... and they slowly come down, and they recalibrate the jets. Have you seen... Have you seen how they land on Mars? When they shoot the things on Mars? Have you seen how they land? Animation Mars rover landing. Because they don't have actual footage of it. They don't have actual footage of it. They don't have actual footage of it. How we landed on the Mars with the Spirit. Right? Yeah, thrusters, whatever they're called. Here we go, flying through space, do. A couple of them crashed in and died. Okay, this one's got hauling ass. Yep, here we go. Here we go. Now I want you to imagine your astronauts in this. Now this is 50 years later, by the way, 50 years later. Here we come in, boom, bango, boom. That's what landing on another planet looks like. And in 1964, they just came down perfect, whatever. If this thing lands, they come down with their Artemis thing, and they don't do this because that'd be a hell of a ride, and then they slow down, and then they land. And then they fly out of there. I want them to nail the auto pan, and I want to see what actually flying off the moon looks like. And here's my prediction. I bet it looks nothing. If they do this, I bet it looks nothing like the one that we just saw. Nothing like it. That. Hey, we're ready to go. 3, 2, 1. It's like a video game. It's like a Nintendo game. And by the way, I think 2 of 4, they screwed up the telemetry and they totally crashed them into Mars and totally ruined the whole thing. Like that happens. It's very hard. Flying to space is very hard without a dome. Dude, Jorge, you got my word, brother. If we go to the moon and TikTok is still up and I'm here and all's good and there's a live moon landing, I will absolutely watch it with you. And if I am convinced that it's not being faked, I am glad, because I do not want to lie. I do not want to misspeak, and I don't want to believe a falsity. That is my word. If I'm wrong about this and they do it, I will gladly say I was wrong. And it would be an honor to do it with you on the air. Absolutely. Okay. Back to the show. Back to the whitewashing, I'm sure. I'm already totally... I can't watch these things. Reality is so much more interesting than some content creators' biased version of the thing. But anyways, let's go. Science in general is not trying to lie. Again, I think it's compartmental. This is the last thing I got to say, Jorge, and then I got to watch this here for a minute. If you don't know my stance on it, I don't think science in general is trying to lie. I think it's compartmentalized the same as NASA. I think there's observable, testable, repeatable science, and then I think that there is a intentional secular bias at the very top, and a multi-generational, unknown subconscious bias at academic levels, where when you go in, there's this very extensive what you can believe, what you can't believe, programming, indoctrination, whatever you'd want to call this, where when certain things are brought up, we're basically told, academia, scholarship, this is what it is and you can't ask any questions. An example is the Gospels, 70 to 110 AD. That's when they were written. We know this. How do we know this? Well, you start asking questions, and if you don't know this, I just found this out recently, the reason they're so confident scholarship is that the Gospel's written after 70 AD is because Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple. So their entire take is a biased take that Jesus wasn't a prophet. Nope, all the original documents are gone. So they look at it and they go, yeah, well, there's no way Jesus would have predicted that. That was stunning. So it was after that. This jump ball bias pervades science. And a lot, Jorge, a lot of professorship, a lot of professors and high-level academics hate the God of the Bible. A lot of them are liberal-minded, God of the Bible hating or opposed lovers of telling children what to believe, which isn't the God of the Bible. And I've known this way before I started VOR. There's there's an old guy named Dave. That's all I can disclose back in Denver. But he was a Division of Wildlife at one point, very high successful attorney, and he called himself a backslidden Catholic. And he believed in Catholicism until he went to university. And he told me it was a combination of his philosophy teacher and his biology teacher, basically gaslighting his beliefs and making him feel bad about what he believed. Can God make a rock that's so heavy you can't lift it? And a couple other things. And they changed his mind about this. And he's now, 50 years later, an atheist. And him and I used to debate. You can imagine playing golf. There was two individuals that I would say very much influenced his belief system. And I've met them now here. You're not one of them. But Blitz, and I've got a list. We're going to do a live. I got to air some things out with him. I think that his secular bias, his anti-God of the Bible bias, blinds his ability to do good science. And I think that his interpretation of the collapsing of the wave function is wrong. I think that his fine-tuning argument is wrong. I think that his stance on Einstein being a non-locally real advocate is wrong. I think that the results from quantum entanglement are wrong. I think that he's wrong because he's very biased. And he's got a materialist bias. Well, whatever he ends up doing in academia, in science, he's likely going to become a professor at some point. There's not a lot of money in researching what he does. So he's going to be a teacher. And guess what he's going to do? Have students in his room and do exactly what Dave's teachers did to them. And I know another one on here very well, Professor Chaos. He goes by Nix now, who, by the way, I have documented saying that he will abandon the Big Bang Theory when they find planets, anything outside of 13.8 billion years. And out of one half of his mouth, he said that's when he will abandon it. And I said, fine, you can come on my show when you're wrong. And they find something. What a ridiculous thing to believe that 13.5 it's fully formed, 13.8 doesn't exist. He hates the God of the Bible. He said, wand, fairy tale, man in the sky, poof, telling me what to do with my genitals. The whole atheist rundown he gives me. The full thing. The full why God is bad, evil Monty. And when I debated him, about 24 of his students came in my room and said, you can't question Nix. He's too smart. He's the guy. You're stupid. And I'm like, dude, I'm exposing your teacher here in real time. And of course, he's taught you that nobody can question him. He is the guy who has a group of students every year come into his room, and he gets a chance to warp their minds and steal their belief in God from them because he hates the God of the Bible and he's the professor. For shame. So, science is science, science is good. Yes, and science is pervaded with the thing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about a guy named Professor Chaos and a professor of astronomy that I debate who's got all the students that look up to him. And he tells him, God of the Bible is a magic man with a wand, and he hates you, and he tells you what to do with your genitals, and we know that, that's a bad thing. So, God is bad, and science disproved God. And I was thinking about this. This is why I'm being passionate about this. Jorge. Oh, yeah. Blitz and Nick, we've had extensive things. I like Blitz. Chaos and I almost want you to watch the live. Wait, you'll watch the next time we debate, and you'll see it. Jorge, can you imagine if I taught a class in university? I'm serious. I want you to think about this. I've actually had many people tell me I should teach university class. And my class is Alternative History of the Universe, which would be the fucking most awesome class ever. And it would be amazing. And I'm really good with young adults. I have a Peter Pan thing, and they're super engaged. I would be the most compelling, persuasive professor you could ever imagine. I'm the guy, I joke with them, I show them the data, I make experiments fun. Now imagine me in a classroom teaching these children that intelligent design is valid and that there's a secular scientific bias. And every year I get 100 new students to infect with my belief system. How do you feel about that, Jorge? Because that's who the chaos is. Nix. And that's who Blitz is going to be. And that's how I feel about it. That's exactly how I feel about it. Not only do they not know if there's a God, everything that they were teaching about the origin of the universe and the origin of life is out. Shit science pushed through basically the control of information. It's a belief system. It's a secular, materialist belief system they push unadulterated with the full approval of the system. This is why I'm so fired up about this kind of thing. And I've presented them, Jorge. I want you to see the debate. I presented him with why the Big Bang's done. Where the universe started. We don't fucking know. What about the inflation? We don't know. What about dark energy? We don't know. Why is it fully formed? We don't know. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing how little he actually had to say on it. And I will say that to his face. Bring him in here. We can have this debate. Well, I can't do it now because I'm on this live studio thing. 1,000 people in the room. I've had the same debates with Blitz. Here's my point, Jorge. I don't want to teach to teach a class in school, because to me, that is intellectually dishonest. I am all for the separation of church and state. Okay? I don't want to teach my beliefs in school, because to me, that's intellectually dishonest. Do you see the problem? Do you see the problem? Stop teaching moldable minds that science has disproven God. Stop it. For shame. Very likely. There being a creator is very likely. It's more likely than there's not. That's not true, Jorge. That is not true. Professor Chaos's students were in my room. His anti-God bias pervades his worldview. And it's not okay. It's not okay. Teach this. Hey, our leading theory right now is that the universe we don't know where it came from. You could believe whatever you want to about how it started. We have no good science or no good, we'll never know. How are we ever going to know? We have no idea. There was no laws, there is a law, broke the laws, it created laws. We don't know. We believe there was an expansion, and we believe there was a starting point, a rapid expansion. We get this interpretation based on the cosmic microwave background radiation and redshift, largely. A little bit about the elements, but that ended up being wrong. It totally ended up being wrong. The whole deuterium thing. Turns out that there's heavy elements at the 13.5 at the beginning of the universe, which they thought only came from nucleosynthesis. You only started with hydrogen and helium, and the other ones come later. You're totally wrong. They're finding heavy elements. Carbon, maybe oxygen, definitely heavy elements. It's totally wrong. It's what we believe. It's the best theory in the clubhouse. Totally questionable, though, because right now we don't know. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go do really good science and prove my theory wrong. If there was a shred of intellectual integrity in science, this is what they would teach. We might be wrong. Go find a better theory. This is not what they teach. And if you don't believe me, look at Nature magazine's recent article about the decline of disruptive science. Disruptive science is on the an extinction level event coming. And you know what's good science? Good science is disruptive. Good science is disruptive. Ask Newton, ask Copernicus. Today, Copernicus would be crucified. And the irony that people in the secular sciences blame religion. For shame. If Copernicus came today and questioned their official model, he would be silenced, descended, and would have to go he would have to go into witness protection, just like what happened with Catholicism. It would be the exact same thing. Disruptive science that questions the standard model is not allowed, which is why I call it a religion. Not that I'm passionate about it. Jorge, when I'm done with this, I'll end this, and then if everybody wants, I'll come back on and we can chat. Science is the religion, yes. Yes. And this is what they do. Let me explain why, and then I'll watch the video. Humans are very controllable. And a population that isn't able to be controlled is very dangerous for the people who have all the fucking money. I should say that again. Take notes. I'm serious. Somebody take notes. You need to hear this. This is going to be like, this is going to change your worldview. This is going to change what you believe about this reality. You ready? Jorge, take notes. Find flaws in my logic. Come back to me with it. Humans are sheep. We're lemmings. We're very controllable. This is why science is a religion. Humans are very controllable. And it benefits the people with the money to stay in power and to be able to control us. How does a dog keep all the sheep under control? By barking. And all the sheep are like, oh, the sheep are like, well, we outnumber this dog 100-1. Yeah, sure, 6 or 8 of us are going to die, but we can take this. We can kick them with our stupid hoofs. We can pillow fight them to death. Okay. And we can put them to sleep. How can I tell this and laugh? Okay. They've tried military might, and they've tried, slavery, and they've tried all of these things that when you press the human spirit, it can fight like hell. Okay, it can fight like hell. And so if you're going to control a whole populace, you need to have a very, very strong army and very strong propaganda for a very long time. And even thus, the people eventually will find a chink, somebody will lead a revolution, and if they can't stamp it out, it'll happen. It's happened over and over and over. So who's in charge now? The people with the money. Let me be very clear who these people would be. It is multi-generational, multi-ethnicity, multi-religious beliefs. Just look at the whatever. You look at Bilderberg, you look at WEF, you can look at whoever. I just don't want anybody to hear what I'm not saying. They've discovered through multi-generations. I mean, if you don't know this, people are like, who are you talking about? You ready for this? You ready for this? Bill Gates, William the Conqueror. Bill Gates is the 28th great-grandson to William the Conqueror. The royal family today are the descendants of Vlad the Impaler. When you run a country, you pass that down to your children. You pass it down to your children. I'm sorry, this has to happen. Chloe's saying I have to stop talking about this. You guys want me to stop talking about this? I need to know. Chloe's saying pull the plug. Am I pulling the plug on this and going back to the video? She's like very like 1 and 0. Like, hey, you're doing a video premiere. You're not doing the video. Keep it up. Keep going. Don't stop. Okay. She's for you guys. She fights. She has to fight me because I'm a maniac. This is why I talk to her. She's my check and balance. Okay. I'll watch the video. I gotta tell this thing. When you run a country, a lot of times it's selective breeding. You're not just going to let your son date some floozy. You got the princess over here, the duchess. You bring these things together. It's like genetically, epigenetically. And you have all of the resources, the land and the power. And you pass this stuff down. Nothing new under the sun. So when I say people with money. I'm not talking about any specific people group. Be very clear. These people that have been ruling for a very long time, they discovered that if the population that you want to control is complicit, they're a lot easier to control. So they set up the illusion of choice. And the illusion of choice is you have to choose between one of two options, and they control both sides. Okay? So, left, right is a joke. Donald Trump, as a Christian, representing whatever, is a joke. Joe Biden, as a Christian, is a joke. But they hated Trump, so you vote Biden in. You hate Biden, so you vote Trump in. And everybody celebrates because they get their guy in. Bush and Obama are cousins. And for those, Jorge is old enough. When I was younger, the Biden-Trump thing was Bush and Obama. You had the conservative Christian white guy, George Bush. And you had the liberal Muslim, the black guy, Obama. And Bush had us in all these terrible sycophant wars lying about it. Military-industrial complex sympathizer. Working for Raytheon, whatever. With Cheney running the show. Just a monkey in the suit. He was a maniac. So you got to vote in the guy. And this is how stupid we are. White, Christian, Republican. Black, Democrat. I can't get any further than that. Watch this. Watch this. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, cousins. It was revealed recently that Vice President Cheney and Barack Obama are cousins. So is Bush. Barack Obama and George W. Bush are cousins. This is a family affair, okay? That was... If you fell for that, if you fell for, I want the warmonger out, Christian warmonger out. By the way, Christians that are warmongers, that's a walking contradiction. That is a hypocrisy. The fact that they took the religious right, which, by the way, Jesus opposed when he was on the earth, Christians need to think about that very hard. That they took the religious right and made them the warmongers, and then they took the political left and made them inclusive? What the is going on here? Can you understand the depth of the psychological manipulation and control that we are in? You can't. If you can't see that Christians shouldn't be pro-war, and really technically pro-guns. I mean, I don't. Tell me where Jesus says, oh, you're going to pull up the sword thing. I know, but you're not supposed to kill. Like, I get it. And I'm not saying, like, I'm fine. I'm for freedom. Have a gun, don't have a gun. Whatever. You make something illegal, it doesn't make it go away. So everybody should... In, I think, Switzerland, they have the least amount of crime ever because everybody has a gun. So you walk up to the door, someone's going to shoot you in the face. Like, you have to defend yourself. I get that. But the idea, like, the left sees Christians representing Jesus in their sin and hypocrisy, being warmongers who want to have guns, as walking contradictions, which they should. And then now you have the left, which is the inclusive party, right? So you've got, like, it's very complicated stuff going on here. But anyways... The left-right paradigm is an illusion. This is my point. And it's to control people. Because you hate being controlled. And when you're under the oppression of the other team, your team is going to fix it. Bullshit. Nobody fixes it. No actual rules are decided by the working class. Do you understand that? Do you understand what I'm telling you? No financial, legitimate rules and laws that affect your life on a consequential level are decided by the working class. This is an elite rich man's game. Do you understand? If you buy into it, you are playing along. Do you understand me? If you're a Christian and you think that you're going to vote Trump in and he's going to drain the swamp, you played into it. I get it. I understand it. I understand the temptation. If you're a liberal and you think Biden saved us from anything, you were had. And it'll happen in the next election, and it'll happen in the next election. Okay, What else do they control? Well, a house divided will fall. Okay? So you separate these people in these, you force them into these weird ideological camps where you have a politic identity. I'm a conservative. I'm a liberal. I hate the other person. Well, guess what? The other person is your friend. Okay? The average working person on your neighborhood block. I don't care what flag they have. They are your friend and your ally. Listen to me. If your car doesn't start, they will come jump it. If you need a cup of milk, they will give it to you. At the neighbor level, we are the same. And we are the same. But if we're too busy fighting each other about who we want to have sex with, and whatever other thing, we see each other as the enemy. Do you think that the Russians are your enemy? I live in northern Maine. It's basically American Russia. It's a very cold place. I get it. I have very good friends that are Russians. I have great friends that are Chinese. I have friends that are Jewish and Japanese and Irish and Scottish and American. These people are all of your friends. I am making Jorge, and I'm going to show you why this is tied to science. Just hold on. This is why Jesus preached, love your brother. Forgive them, because people fuck up, and you fucked up. Forgive our debtors as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Be conscious. Be giving. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Forgive people in an unfair way. Don't shoot them for wronging you. Hatfield and McCoys, the Hatfields and the McCoys. Does anybody in this chat know? You've heard the story of the Hatfields and the McCoys and how serious this was. They killed each other. It was like an ultimate gang war. They were like cousins or something, and then eventually they were killing each other. You're a Hatfield? Not in my neighborhood. Get off my yard, Hatfield. You're a McCoy. Does anybody in this chat know what the original fight was about that separated the Hatfields and the McCoys? Does anybody in this chat know what they originally fought over? Good answers. I try to practice Sabbath. Not super religious, but I think it's great to rest. I didn't for 20 years. I'm really thankful to do it. Geraldine gets it right. She meant pig. She said pog. I don't think they were fighting over marbles or whatever. It was a pig. It was a disagreement on the price of a pig. It was a pig. It was a pig. And it wasn't forgiven, and retribution began, and it became a feedback loop, and then it was the Hatfields and the McCoys. Jesus says forgive. Anyways. House divided will fall. So check this out. Left, right, that's an easy one, right? White, black. Have we seen that whole fight recently? Has that come up recently? Whatever a police officer does has nothing to do with the guy who owns the convenience store, which, by the way, was probably a black guy. I get that you're mad. We should be nice to each other. That didn't fix anything. Left, right, white, black, who we have sex with, who we don't, civil rights, state rights, whatever. We're constantly fighting over these things, right? We're constantly fighting over these things because the people in charge need us to not be allied. Because we outnumber them 8 billion to probably 80,000 or 8,000 or something. 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, maybe 100,000 to 1, maybe 1,000,000 to 1. I don't know. And outside of nuking us all, which doesn't benefit them, it's really hard. So they just need to keep us docile. Okay, what's the other way they control us? This is the big one, Jorge. This is what I need you here for. What you believe about this reality, your religion, your belief system. They need to control that narrative. And they do it the same way they do left, right. We have been under an oscillating change of philosophic religious regimes for a very long time. And the evolution goes like this. The person's in charge, who are in charge, everybody's like, yeah, well, we know the Pharaoh's in charge. They're the one run the show. Well, how did they get there? Well, because they're gods. This is how it starts. Well, they're gods. That's why. They're in charge because they're gods. And everybody's like, well, they're really high up there. And I guess he is a god. And then somebody gets a little bit closer, and they go, wow, you're just a human. I smelled your fart. You're just a human. And the rumor gets out, they're not gods. And then they come out and they go, here's the thing. We're not gods. We never said we were gods. We represent God. You see, we represent God. God talks to us. And our priest here can bend the ear of God. Our priest hears the thing. So you can question me, but you can't question my priest. Because he's connected to God. And he has the inside. He has the skinny. And guess what the priest also does? Worship the king. Worship the king. Or else. Or else what? Solar eclipse will come. Holy shit, it happened. Worship the king or else what? Eventually people have enough of it. And they go, your religion sucks. It's been controlling us and I'm out. And they offer up another religion. Atheism is a religion. Secular scientific materialism is a religion. The Catholic Church was a theocracy, and an unfair theocracy, not based on the merits of the man they claimed to follow, Jesus. Nothing about what they were doing, not nothing, but largely, politically, economically, what they were doing did not represent the teachings of Jesus, which is why they had the Vicar of Christ, the God King, the God guy to tell you, right? The Pope, he tells you whatever. Well, Gutenberg read the book, said no way, printed it out, gave it out, and the Catholic Church crumbled. Now, they have so much land and momentum and indoctrination, they're staying in some version of power, although it's dwindling. This would just be a real estate group at some point. But what you have, because it's like, just talk about a whitewashed tomb. Jesus says, a tomb with dead bones in it. Looks good on the outside, but it's filled with rotted bones. That's Catholicism, in the best case. I love Catholics. There's good people who love Jesus, but there's also bad people. Anyways, doesn't matter. Trying, Jorge. It's hard. I'm not great at I guess I have two eyeballs. So here's what happened. You had the Lutheran Reformation, you had the Church of England, you had all these things kind of going on. And then you had the Age of Enlightenment. And what was the Age of Enlightenment? Copernicus actually played a role in it. It was, we can't trust Catholicism because they're absolute maniacs, taking more than they should. You could buy your salvation. Confession was tied to, what did you do? Well, I had sex with a prostitute. Well, that's $400. Really? Yeah. You don't want to go to hell, do you? I'm in 100 for the hooker. Now 400 for this. All right, who do I write the check to? Right? And they would do this. Which benefited guess who? The people with money. Does the mafia come into this? Does that sound good? Any of those crime families back in the day? Any of that Italian power? Okay. Eventually, the Age of Enlightenment happened. And this is historical fact. A new age of reason. I remember when George Clooney said it at the end of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He said, yes, Delmer and Elmer, whatever the name is. A new age of reason. A veritable age of reason, I tell you. We're all going to be connected to the grid. Out with the superstitious mumbo-jumbo of religion. In with science. I almost want to play it. I paraphrased it well enough. This is what happened. And the people were so eager to get away from Catholic power and Anglican power. It wasn't just Catholic. I could pull up right now Thomas Henry Huxley and the X Club. I'm going to go back to this, actually. This is Thomas Henry Huxley. He was known as Darwin's Bulldog. Darwin's Bulldog. About to start writing on his Origin of Species, he saw Huxley's star rising. A visit to Darwin's house laid the foundation of a long relationship. She and Emma Darwin, which is his wife, and Emma, Charles' wife and Huxley's wife, shared concerns over their husband's scientific theorizing and its theological consequences. And the Darwins stood as godparents to two of the Huxley's aged children. He's the Bulldog. It's like Moses and Aaron. What's his name? Darwin could never got the theory out. He just wasn't enough of an orator. Science is popularized by personalities intentionally, whether it's me or Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson or whatever. This is who Huxley was. They complement each other perfectly. The reclusive Darwin needed a public champion and defender. Huxley had initial difficulty with natural selection and opted for an internal source of variation that could produce new species at a stroke. It's called punctuated equilibrium. He didn't believe in Darwin's theory. He's like, your theory sucks, but people seem to believe it. So, Chuck, we're going to go with it. He saw it as a valuable aid in his campaign to build an independent, scientific elite, unfettered by the constraints of the old order. Are you in here, Jorge? Roll call, please. Thank you, Chappie, for the subscription. Are you in here? What do you think the old order is? This is gonna hurt, but you gotta hear this. Charles Darwin's bulldog, who actually made the theory of evolution happen, saw Darwin's naturalistic, materialistic, i.e. non-miraculous, this is Britannica, this isn't some sort of creation website, I don't use that source, or those sources, as a valuable aid in his campaign to build an independent, scientific elite unfettered by the constraints of the old order. What do you think the old order was, Jorge? Rather than shy away from the controversial aspects, he played them up, using it as a Whitworth gun in the armory of liberalism. Unlike some contemporaries, blah, 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 who sought a reconciliation between science and theology, Huxley framed the debate. Is this not showing? How is this not showing? Oh, it's too far down. Okay. Just make sure you don't think I'm making it up. Some individuals sought a reconciliation between science and theology, but Huxley framed the debate over Christian and evolution in black and white either-or terms and was unforgiving of colleagues who straddled the fence. A defining moment in his professional campaign came early in exchange with conservative bishop. He was fighting against the church order, which he should have been. This sucks. Their church order sucked. At the British Association for the Advancement of Science meeting in 1860, Wilberforce apparently asked whether his apes were on his grandmother's side or grandfather's side, a tasteless joke by Victorian standards, to which Huxley, exuding Puritan virtue, replied that he would rather have an ape as an ancestor than a wealthy bishop who prostituted his gifts. Do you see? Is this starting to become clear to anybody? Everybody was under oppression. You had the elites, who a lot of them were religious, and you had the poor. And suddenly, Darwinian evolution becomes a rally cry against the old order. Do you understand? I'm sorry, Holly. I'm almost done. This isn't... I'm engaging with Jorge, but like this video, I don't want to be like, you can go watch it, but you can go watch it. It's propaganda. I already see where he's going. He's gonna say the moon landing happened. It's already poisoning me. But anyways, we're gonna keep going. This is an important conversation. So where did the bishop go? So where are the monkeys from? Which side of the family? My mother's or my father's? And he goes, I would rather have a monkey for an uncle than an elitist religious prick who is using God to control us. And the masses celebrated. Nor did Huxley shy away from appropriating religious authority when it suited his purposes. He spoke of developing a church scientific and arranged for Darwin to be buried at Westminster Abbey. He carried the standard of scientific naturalism and evolution on a number of battlefields. He challenged the notion of supernatural creation. This is the thing, science, Jorge. There is an agenda, historically. This is what I'm showing you, and it's very clear. He carried the standard of scientific naturalism and evolution on a number of battlefields. He challenged the notion of supernatural creation, informing his democratic artisans that humans had arisen from animals, a lowly ancestor, bright future image that appealed to the downtrodden, and that Darwin's nature was a book open for all to read. You literally said that earlier, Jorge. Rather than the prerogative of priests, he plunged headlong in inflammatory issues of human ancestries. So I could go further into this. Power and Pope Huxley, one of the leading scientists of the era. Huxley, these qualities gave him the levers necessary to elevate the position of science in British society, and he helped to build a social order in which science and professionalism replaced classics and patronage. He did not fight alone with these people. He clearly penetrated the labyrinth corridors of power. I'm almost done here. Called the general. His popularity grew with his political influence. The media was behind him, obviously. Demonstrated evidence of evolution and was dubbed Huxley, which was a forgery. They're all forgeries. Protoplasm. He coined the term agnostic. He made the term agnostic, meaning that one could know nothing of ultimate reality. And then, let's see here. The Old Lion. I'm almost done. Dissected the scriptural literalism and refuted his attempt to reconcile the fossil evidence with the order of creation listed in the book of Genesis. Yes, he, along with Lyell, were out intentionally to undo specifically the book of Genesis. That was their thing. Almost done. It was Huxley as much. Huxley as much as unionist and nationalist as a brilliant propagandist for science who was appointed prime minister. So let's see here. Anyways, they create the X Clubs, and the X Club dominates and sets up a secular order with government funding, and will only teach natural secular science, which is where the British Royal Society comes from, and the American Natural History Museum comes from, and why we have natural history museums all over the world. And the government funds it because of Huxley's anti-God bias. This is true history. This is true history. This is the issue. This is the history. This is the science that we have today. I mean, if you're into, like, facts in history. But, hey, some people aren't. I think you are, though. All right, back to the video.
It didn't survive, but in 1960, the Soviets launched 2 dogs and a bunch of mice and rats that did return safely. The first human in space was Yuri Gagarin. Valentina Tereshkova was the first woman in space. The first multi-person crew. The first spacewalk. The first spacecraft to reach the moon. The first pictures of the far side of the moon. And even the first soft landing and transmission from the moon's surface. These were all Russian achievements. Meanwhile, America's attempts to catch up were not going well. Rumors started going around that the Russians were going to put nuclear weapons on the moon.
We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but with instruments of knowledge.
So there was tremendous public pressure to get there first.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
On July 16th, 1969, Apollo 11 launched successfully. Four days later, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot on the moon.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In just a few years, the United States went from being years behind the Soviets in space exploration to eclipsing all of their achievements. To many people, this was just too good to be true. So skeptics started poring over photographs and film looking for evidence of a hoax. And the evidence was everywhere. The first clue of a hoax was that the astronauts seemed to be casting shadows in 2 different directions. But the sun is the only light source on the moon. On Earth, shadows run parallel. On the moon, not only did shadows go in different directions, but sometimes they were at right angles to each other. The only way to explain this is multiple light sources, like you'd get on a movie soundstage. Studio lights would also explain this shot. In a vacuum with only a single light source, the shadows on the moon should be absolutely, completely black. But there's a lot of film and photos where, even though the astronauts are in shadow, they're lit extremely well. Now, in the movies, the sun would be called a key light, which is your main light. And this light in the shadows would be from what's called a fill light. But there's no fill light on the moon, only a key light, the sun. There seems to be a Hollywood lighting technique happening here. Now, you're not going to find any direct evidence of studio lights in any pictures from the moon. NASA's too smart for that. But even in big-budget movies, you can sometimes see the cameras and lights in reflections. Now look at this. In the reflection on the helmet, it looks like a neat row of movie lights. And look at the reflection on this photo.
What the heck is that?
That looks a lot like a studio light with the barn doors open. Now here's a photo that shows what looks like a movie prop. This rock is labeled with the letter C, but the crew forgot to remove the label when they started shooting. How about this picture of the landing module? Do those hills look like they're miles away? Or do they look like this was shot on a soundstage? And speaking of those hills, this photo was supposedly taken a few miles away from the landing module. Then how come the backgrounds are identical?
Because they use the same backdrop.
Now let's talk about stars. On Earth, even with our thick atmosphere, the sky looks like this. But on the moon, with no air, the sky is just black? Shouldn't the sky be full of stars? NASA really thought this one through. If you're going to hoax something in space, the stars are a big problem. This is because by using a star map, you can not only get the precise location a photo was taken, you can even get the precise day and time. So they had to get rid of the stars.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Small problem. They use stars to help them navigate to the moon.
The astronaut navigator finds a known star in the wide-angle telescope. Using a fingertip control, he changes the attitude of the spacecraft to bring the star into line. Once he has the star in position in the telescope, he moves the optical sextant. He lines the sextant up with the star and makes a reading.
So are there stars or not? Which is it? There's a lot of evidence stacking up that doesn't look good for NASA or the moon landing. And we're just warming up.
NASA and the government faked the moon landing was basically, it was technically impossible to do it. And they simply had to come up with some sort of alternative that they felt the public would believe.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio.
Can you realize that that you and I, that all of us, have actually begun the exploration of another world?
The United States Geological Survey decided to build a model of one part of the lunar surface in an area accessible to present research centers.
4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Reflections of studio lights, accidental movie props, repeating backdrops. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that the moon landing wasn't filmed on the moon, but on a soundstage. The lunar module engine puts out 3,000 pounds of thrust, and the lunar surface is covered with dust that was described as fine powder. If that's true, why did the engine leave no mark on the surface? And shouldn't there be dust everywhere? Even the footpads are clean and shiny. So either the landing module was sitting there, or it was gently lowered down by a crane. And you'd have to lower the thing gently. Look at it. It looks like tinfoil and curtain rods held together by duct tape. More evidence that a crane was used is when the astronauts separate from the module and return to orbit for pickup. Look at this. The module separates and the astronauts gently lift back to orbit. And look how slowly it moves. Where's the rocket plume from the engine? What's allowing this to fly all the way to orbit? If you watch the footage closely, it looks like the object is wobbling a little on cables or wires. By the way, who shot this footage? There was no camera remote control, but somehow the scene is framed perfectly. They're zooming in and out. The camera tracks the object up into the sky, but conveniently loses the object when it gets too high.
Interesting,
But
they're
the camera
covering
does
this.
pan around the surface.
I wonder if they
Who's
do my
working the
research.
camera? Now, speaking of cables and wires, look at this footage. Does this look natural? Or does it look like he's being lifted by wires?
Houston, Apollo 11, how do you read? Apollo 11, this is Houston. Go ahead. Lem looks to be in pretty fine shape. About all we can see from here. Okay, in reference to your question on this step 13 on the decal, I understand that you have used up the contents of the repressed O2 package, and at that time, instead of being...
Then there's this footage of Neil and Buzz putting up the American flag. But if they were both on the moon's surface, who's shooting the footage? And
That's
how
an
is
easy
the flag
one.
waving
There
if
was a
there's no
camera there.
atmosphere on the moon?
It's not waving.
Now, sure, we've been told that there was an
There was
aluminum
no
tube holding up the
wind
flag,
in their stage.
but it seems to be moving around a lot. Now, here's a picture of what an Apollo astronaut spacesuit looked like. But look at the soles of the shoes. They don't look anything like the footprints the astronauts supposedly made in the lunar dust.
They say
And
there's
what
a
about the
skin
heat?
that they wore
the
over it.
surface temperature on the moon during the day is over 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That's as hot as an oven. The film inside their cameras should have melted. But there are thousands of pictures that all came out perfectly fine.
Well, fine, except for the whole wrong shadows, no stars, movie props, visible lights, and stuff being hoisted by cranes.
Right, except for that. And there are plenty of photos that are flat out doctored. If you remember our episode on NASA's Mars cover-up, we proved that the photos of Mars were altered before being released to the public. This is a technique perfected during Apollo. The Apollo handheld cameras had special crosshairs on them called Rousseau marks, and these were here to help make sure the photos were printed properly from the negatives and not distorted, and to make it easier to stitch photos together for panoramas. But in some of the photos, the crosshairs aren't there, or are only in part of the picture. In other photographs, objects appear in front of the crosshairs. Now that's physically impossible, unless the objects were added after the photo was taken, by layering them on top of empty backgrounds. And there are even more problems with the photography. Here's a picture of an Apollo astronaut saluting the American flag. But look at his feet. The shadows don't even reach them. It's like he was edited in later and somebody forgot to add a shadow. Now, even if we could explain all these anomalies in the photos, there's a big reason why nobody can get to the moon. A reason why human beings can't leave Earth at all, at least not yet. The reason is real and scientifically proven as fact. Radiation.
We covered a lot of this, so I'm still really curious. The jury's out for me if he's actually going to be debunking this or not.
Pop up
I think he is
any
debunking
exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
Our research suggests that images of the Apollo landings are not a true and accurate record. In our view, the Apollo pictures were faked. Many of the images are replete with inconsistencies and anomalies.
There are problems with almost every aspect of the visual records, equipment, and technology used to supposedly put a man on the moon. But there's one even bigger problem we haven't dealt with yet. There's no way the astronauts could have even escaped Earth's orbit, much less gone to the moon and back. Radiation. In 1958, scientist James Van Allen discovered two enormous belts of high-energy radiation surrounding the planet. The Van Allen radiation belts are a pair of toroidal belts
Donut-shaped.
donut-shaped belts of high-energy particles. Any object leaving the Earth's orbit to visit the moon or beyond has to pass through them, and they extend out about 37,000 miles from Earth. These two radiation belts have different compositions. The inner belt above the equator contains energetic particles that are charged up to 100 million electron volts. The outer belt is electron plasma from the sun's solar wind, and it has energies in the 10 million electron volt range. When it was first detected, the strength of the radiation was so powerful that scientists thought they had recorded a Soviet nuclear test. These high-energy particles can penetrate spacecraft, damage instruments, and are lethal to astronauts. But we have photos and even film of the Earth taken from much farther out. How could this be faked? Well, the astronauts never left low Earth orbit. From there, the Earth fills the entire window of the craft.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with a TV camera. So your view
This is
now
pretty good, this
probably
one.
better than ours is.
So to get this film of the Earth, they blocked out sections of the window. This film is an outtake. The astronauts didn't realize they were still rolling.
Look at this.
They said the camera was pressed up against the window to get a good shot of the Earth. But that's not true. You can see someone pass in front of the window, then quickly jump out of the way.
And they had
Here you see the dim work light that was used so they could operate the camera. We're not supposed to see this. We're also not supposed to see this. Someone adjusting the insert that controls the shape of the Earth. Now remember, they're in low Earth orbit, so the Earth is actually really bright and fills the whole window. How do we know? Because when they open up the iris of the lens, we can see it.
Holy sh**.
Get him, conspiracy fish. Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah,
but
we
no.
can't pass through the Van Allen belts yet. Don't take my word for it. Take NASA's.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. But
This is
Orion
for
has
Artemis.
protection.
Oh, Orion.
Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
I guess we're still working on solving this issue? Because I thought we...
We're also really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're going forward with exploration. I think humans are naturally driven to do this, and this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit. I certainly plan on being around to see that.
I don't want to be a jerk because she seems like a nice girl, but newsflash, the moon is way outside low Earth orbit.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. We only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go.
Again, I think dude's gonna do like a whitewash of this. I think he's gonna go pro. We actually went. But yeah, these are problems. The Van Allen radiation belt is a problem. And I was just thinking, like, if they do want to go back, I got a new challenge for them. Let's not only go back, let's go back with 1969 tech. Like, you want to make it really challenging? I mean, they did it 50, 70, whatever years ago. Let's just go back with the same suits and the same technology. Seems like a valid scientific test.
And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Once we travel beyond low Earth orbit, the crew will be exposed to larger amounts of radiation. So we have to design both the crew protection systems and our electronic systems to withstand this radiation.
But didn't we already design those protection systems for Apollo? Why don't we just use that
Glad we could help, Rick.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond.
But we lost
But
technology.
the problem is we don't have the technology to do that.
We destroyed
anymore.
it.
We
It's really
used
hard
to,
getting it back.
But we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Wait, we destroyed the technology and we can't recreate it? So nobody wrote anything down? That seems irresponsible.
Oh, you mean irresponsible, like recording over the original moon landing tapes?
Yeah, NASA did that. There are no original high-quality moon landing tapes. They were erased and reused.
Allegedly.
The footage we see of the moon landing was taken in a very strange way. NASA took a video feed from the moon and projected it onto a screen. Then TV stations pointed their cameras at the screen. The stations wanted a direct feed, but NASA refused. That's why the moon landing footage is such a mess. Anyway, the best way to protect a fragile human body...
Anyway, you guys, I gotta, my sweet wife, it's 11 o'clock at night and she made me quesadilla. Yes, I'm Hispanic and quesadilla está muy bien. Gracias, esposa. Mi novia. Okay, I'm gonna munch this. I'm gonna mute. But yeah, I've heard that before. I forgot about that. Like, hey NASA, let's get the feed. No. We're gonna project it onto something and film it, and then we'll send you that. Does that sound good? It's the biggest fucking thing that's ever happened. Gotta make sure that we do that. Man, I say all the time, I'm so glad I'm not an atheist to try to defend that. Like our guy Jorge in here, our brother, he's awesome. He believes in God, or, you know, he's okay with the idea of God. He's not like, there's no God or there's no way science, has a view on it. I'm so glad I don't have to defend Apollo. Like, I love being skeptical. I love being skeptical of this system. I have been, I'll continue to be. I love it. I love the position. And we might be right about all this. We might be right about a lot of this stuff, which would be crazy. It'd be absolutely crazy. If Jesus is real, and God is real, and the devil's real, and like these things that we're talking about are like real, and we're right, imagine how crazy that would be. Anyways, here we go. I'm gonna munch.
From Van Allen radiation is lead shielding. But even a thin layer of lead would have made the Saturn V rocket too heavy to get off the ground. The only protection they had was a thin sheet of aluminum. But aluminum melts at about 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. The electrons in the Van Allen belts have energies of millions of volts. Now this would equate to a temperature of about 10 million degrees Kelvin. So how did NASA overcome this problem? They didn't. Instead, they called Hollywood.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
But right now, we need a 10 to 12-year program that has as its ultimate goal the man domination of space. And if we don't, we're going to be in trouble.
To put people on the moon with enough fuel to enable them to return safely home to Earth requires a still larger and more powerful rocket, however.
A member of Congress said today that he was tired of seeing the United States second to Russia in the space deal.
And only the future will tell whether we'll manage to close that gap.
It's going to take some time, and I think we have to recognize it. They secured these large boosters, which have led to their being first in Sputnik and led to their first putting their man in space. We are, I hope, going to be able to carry out our efforts with due regard to the problem of the life of the man involved this year. But we are behind.
Kubrick's Odyssey is a short film created by Jay Weidner in 2011. Recently, it gained attention after being picked up by the Gaia streaming network. This film is the primary reference for the theory that Stanley Kubrick filmed the moon landing footage for NASA in the 1960s and 70s. By 1964, NASA knew that sending men to the moon was impossible. The deadly radiation belts, issues with chemical rockets, and weight and radiation shielding issues, it made it unachievable. Kubrick became involved when someone in the Pentagon saw his 1963 film, Dr. Strangelove. Impressed by the special effects, this person offered Kubrick a secret project, faking the Apollo moon landings. Kubrick was persuaded using a carrot and stick approach. If he helped fake the landings, he would have artistic freedom and financial support for his future films. That's the carrot. The stick was blackmail.
No one knows how the powers that be convinced Kubrick to direct the Apollo landings. Maybe they had compromised Kubrick in some way. The fact that his brother, Raoul Kubrick, was the head of the American Communist Party may have been one of the avenues pursued by the government to get Stanley to cooperate.
So a deal was made in 1964. Kubrick was given 3 years to complete 2001 in order to test the filmmaking technology necessary to make the moon landings appear believable. To assist him, he had access to several NASA experts and the use of a special 50mm lens made specifically for the Apollo program.
Originally was a lens manufactured, designed, developed, and manufactured by Zeiss for NASA.
So how did he do it? Without the use of CGI, Kubrick perfected a new kind of visual effect called front screen projection. Experimentation with front screen projection began in 1949, shortly after the invention of Scotchlight, a material used for screens in movie theaters. Scotchlight is cloth embedded with millions of tiny glass beads that have high reflectivity. Due to the sensitivity of Scotchlight, a minimal amount of light is required. This means that actors can stand in front of the projection without it being visible on their bodies or clothing. Front screen projection was so convincing that many people think the Dawn of Man sequences in 2001 were actually shot on location. They weren't. Almost all that part of 2001 was shot in a studio with actors on sets.
I don't know if Jorge's still in there, but you know why conspiracies happen and why conspiracies like this don't go away. I mean, if you don't know, the CIA's basically come out and said that we killed Kennedy, or we were involved. What they'll release of the documents 50 years later, nobody cares. They're like, oh, well, whatever. Probably deserved it or something. Trust CIA is good. Is going to keep... Eventually, they might make it to the moon and go, hey, we lied about it. And you guys believe that shit. That's crazy. But part of the reason why these conspiracies happen and pervade is when you start thinking about something like, how would this have been faked? You would have needed the most impressive Hollywood studio involved. No, it wasn't Israeli. Stop. Don't start with the... Don't. No, no, no. Nope. Part of what... the way these things happen is... These conspiracies happen is that at the same freaking exact time, concurrently with the moon landing, 2001: A Space Odyssey was being filmed with NASA lenses, unlimited budget, using these screens, using moon tricks. If you don't have Kubrick filming 2001, which is a very humanist, secularist, space magic, Babylonian space magic movie being filmed exactly when they were supposedly landing on the moon, you have a harder story to corroborate. But this happening at the same time is one of those things why this conspiracy won't go away. You have the motive, right? If you just like try and put this together forensically, like follow the money. What's the motivation? We can't get there. Russia's kicking our butts. We have to win this thing. You have the funding, government obviously funding it. You've got the abilities with low Earth orbit and Stanley Kubrick and Hollywood. You have everything you need here. Like all you basically have now is NASA's word, which when Jorge said that about the Bible's the only proof of God, NASA's the only proof of the moon landing. And you basically have the same thing. It's like, do you believe what the Bible says? Yes, you believe in God. Okay. Do you believe in what NASA says? Yes. What do you believe? But yeah, the Kubrick thing is such a huge part of this conspiracy having legs. Really, really makes it a needle mover.
If you look closely at Apollo photographs of the moon, you can see a line where the fake moon set ends and the front projection screen begins. At that line, the texture of the lunar surface changes dramatically.
Please note how everything is in focus, from the rocks and pebbles close to the camera, all the way to the crystal clear mountain behind the astronaut. There is a stark difference in ground texture between the set and what is being projected onto the screen. You can almost count the number of small rocks and the granularity of the ground that is clearly seen on the set. Once we get to the screen on the other side of my line, this granularity disappears. The little pebbles and dust just seem to disappear behind my line.
It's live, Lucy, yeah. The
latter part of Kubrick's Odyssey,
for those just joining now, this is the Y files. They just released this. I'm not a huge fan of the show, but I thought it'd be interesting to do a live reaction, VOR reaction video, so that's what we're doing. I'm live. This was started at 9 p.m., so we're a little bit behind, but just happened, just premiered tonight.
Discusses the hidden messages in The Shining that Kubrick directed in 1980. Kubrick leaves clues that he faked the moon landings. The characters Jack and Danny, who are the father and son in the movie, symbolize different aspects of Kubrick's own personality. Danny, the child, represents Kubrick's inner innocence, while Jack represents the jaded and morally compromised adult that Kubrick has become. There are also specific visual clues. The Indian wall hangings on the walls of the Overlook Hotel look like rockets launching into space. The pattern on the carpet of the hotel is a hexagonal shape that represents the shape of the launch pads at Cape Canaveral. And in one scene, when Danny is playing with his toys on this carpet, he stands up and is seen wearing a sweater that says Apollo 11 on it. Next, there's a scene where Danny then walks down the hall and finds an open door to a room. The room is number 237,
Look at the room number.
Which was changed from room 217 in the Stephen King novel. The number 237 is significant because the average orbital distance between the Earth and the Moon is 237,000 miles. Then there's the scene where Jack's wife discovers that he's been typing the same phrase over and over. The phrase is, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But the word all isn't A-L-L. It's actually typed out as A-11, or Apollo 11. And there are a lot of other claims made by Kubrick's Odyssey, but those are the highlights. And
I gotta say that Kubrick would do that. He was a master genius filmmaker, storyteller. And I believe he absolutely snuck that in there. It's not an accident. What does he have to do with Apollo? Why is he doing this? Crazy cryptic things he's putting in there. And the cults use symbology all the time. And I think all of this is very much vetted by his movie Eyes Wide Shut. He made Eyes Wide Shut and showed their satanic sex parties, and actually got in a lot of trouble with the studios. They cut a lot of it out, and then I think he died shortly after. I think he was trying to kind of expose the system. Earlier they're asking how he was compromised. Those sex parties get a lot of people. Ooh, it's anonymous. Do your thing. Do what thou wilt.
And these claims were highly debated and very controversial. What we need is Kubrick admitting he faked the moon landing. We need to hear it from his own mouth, but he never said a word about it. Or did he?
This is a hit piece. He's going to go by piece and dismantle this. This has been my prediction. Morsey, if you're still here, every one of these, he's going to come back and refute each one of them. This guy likely wasn't Kubrick. It was an actor who pretended to play Kubrick. This guy.
We've been brought in here by Stanley Kubrick to more or less ensure the scientific integrity of the film, to make sure that it's very, very close in reality, but still we want to make certain that it has a base of reality.
We're in the final assembly building of the LEM. Stanley Kubrick and I have set ourselves several objectives. We hope to convey to the public the wonder and beauty and promise of the new age of exploration which is opening up before the human race.
Take one.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Good evening. I'm sorry not to be able to be with you tonight.
In 2016, an interview with Stanley Kubrick was found. And according to the video, Kubrick had to sign an 88-page non-disclosure agreement that the interview would stay hidden for 15 years.
Is everything looking in order regarding our contract and the 15-year agreement, and I signed the non-disclosure? So that's all for the legal stuff, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
looks good to me.
All right.
A documentary filmmaker interviews Stanley Kubrick about his career as a director. And right from the start, Kubrick interrupts and explains that when he initially considered the project, he saw it as just another film. When asked which of his movies he's referring to, he reveals that he's talking about the moon landing.
Morsey, bro, I'm telling you, I wanted to make, I researched all of this stuff, which is why I had that clip that they just showed. I could make this video. Actually, I almost made an Apollo video, but I didn't. I was doing deep research on it when I decided not to, because I'm trying to tell people about Jesus, not that we didn't go to the moon, and people can conflate those ideas. Although I do think they're related. But anyways, this guy, it was a project. The guy came out and said he did it. That's not Kubrick. It's a cool, convincing video. I mean, it looks like Kubrick. I debunked it. This guy's definitely going to debunk it, which is why I think he's going in the debunk area. It's not Kubrick. There's an actor. We know who it is.
And claims that it was all fake.
The challenge of making this film, and I went into it like it was a regular film, like another production of mine. Not thinking too much about the long-term effects that
I'm sure the guy will tell you who it is. I'm sure he gives the name later. I found it.
to society if it was ever discovered.
What are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. You're referring to something...
The fake moon landing.
He says that he was approached by NASA and that they appealed to his sense of duty and patriotism. But Kubrick admitted that the project was about America's public image and upstaging Russia.
To fulfill this dream that America has had as a country since the Kennedy years.
Okay, so you're saying the motivation was PR?
PR, absolutely. Plain and simple, PR.
Then he goes on to confirm that the conspiracy is actually the truth.
Faking the exploration of space because there was just no way we could get there.
NASA then set up a meeting with Kubrick and President Richard Nixon. Kubrick met with Nixon in the Oval Office and details what Nixon asked him to do: film a fake moon landing.
I am convinced, and the gentlemen at NASA are also convinced, that you can help us make people believe that we have been to the moon.
This interview was a bombshell. This was the evidence the world had been waiting for. This was evidence that every allegation made in the documentary Kubrick's Odyssey was true.
Yep.
Millions of people saw this interview and finally felt justified in their suspicion that the moon landing never happened.
Yep.
One small problem.
No.
That wasn't Stanley Kubrick.
No.
The Stanley Kubrick moon landing confession set the conspiracy side of the internet on fire, but it was a hoax. This is either a filmmaker and an actor, or more likely, two guys goofing around. In the full-length version of the interview, an agitated producer constantly badgers the actor whose real name is Tom.
A launch pad accident in '67, which killed.
Tom, you're going to tell me a story. So Nixon sat me down in the Oval Office, and he says to me, "You know that boy just out of the thing. This is how I want you. Then we're going to kneel. We're going to kneel. Yeah.
The plan. He didn't. Yeah.
So he says to me, "You don't say he said anything. You say what he says, okay?" That's all, Tom. I'm just giving you a direction.
You want me?
Everything about I walked in and he said,
say it as him, or do you want?
You don't have to imitate him, but you have to say. He says, "Stanley, we've worked on this moon program." You're not.
Come on, get with it, Tom.
Do your shtick. Do a shtick. Get in the fact that you're writing this, Tom, and not everything's got to be drab. It can be funny in a very subtle way. So you meet with Nixon, and what happened? And action.
That producer sucks.
What they believed was, if we could
Nixon sat down. Color, tell me the story, Tom.
So Stanley Kubrick had nothing to do with that interview. Not just that, he had nothing to do with the moon landing. In the documentary Kubrick's Odyssey, everything can be explained. All the photo evidence presented is from extremely low-resolution photos, probably grabbed from the web. Now, unfortunately for the documentary, but lucky for us, high-resolution photos can be found easily. So when looking at a low-resolution photo of the lunar landscape, you can maybe see a separation between the foreground and the supposed backdrop. But in the high-res photos, the line isn't there. All the other claims in the documentary that refer to photos can be explained simply by looking at the originals. As far as the clues left in The Shining, those are nothing but coincidences and stretches of the imagination. The rockets in the tapestry, I don't really see it. The hexagonal rug? Well, the launch pad at Cape Canaveral is not a hexagon. It was roughly 10 sides, but it's not very symmetrical. Room 237 is just room 237. The moon isn't 237,000 miles away from the Earth. It's closer to 239,000, but varies slightly. Danny is indeed wearing an Apollo 11 sweater. But Stanley Kubrick was a space nut. He loved the Apollo program, and he loved sci-fi. And Stanley Kubrick's brother Paul, who was the leader of the Communist Party, well, that's not true at all. Kubrick didn't have a brother. So that documentary is debunked.
Well, maybe debunked, maybe not.
No, it's debunked. It is.
Yeah, agree to disagree. Yeah, but there's still a lot of stuff in those pictures that looks really fishy.
Well, that's true. The big one is that the shadows should be parallel. Since the shadows are not parallel, there must be other light sources. Except shadows aren't parallel. The direction of shadows depends on the perspective of the viewer. Now here's an example on Earth. These are two pictures of the same woman, taken at different angles. In the first photo, taken from the side, the shadows are parallel. But when we put our back to the sun, the shadows aren't even close to parallel. In perspective drawing and design, parallel lines converge in what's called a vanishing point. This is typically the horizon line where objects vanish beyond our field of view. Plus, the astronauts used very wide lenses to capture as much.
What do I think about the movie? It's playing out exactly like I anticipated. My mind is a blessing and a curse. And one of one of the problems is it makes deductions before I fully understand all the variables. And people were telling me you got to check out the Y files, and I watched a little bit, and I've only watched a little bit of his content, but there's a spirit about it. There's a deduction about what he's doing. And I just like we've talked about, Matt, Joe Rogan is allowed to do what he does because he's misinformation. He's controlled opposition. You know, this Y-Files guy, when I saw him say that life came from a single cell and mutated into, he entirely promoted Darwinian evolution, I realized he's a shill. And it's no surprise. How do you get 4 million viewers? Well, you don't make the content I make. You just make this shit. If I wanted to be an atheist debunking science, I could be a millionaire. Probably quite literally. I bet if I wanted to be an atheist debunking Christianity and science, I bet you I could get a contract deal for 6 figures in a year. Maybe sooner. So, what I figured here was that he was going to produce compelling evidence and then debunk it. And if Morsey's here, I said that's definitely, that was my take. My vote was that he was going to show everything and he was going to then debunk it all. And he's absolutely doing that. So, good information laced with poison.
Terrain as possible.
Just like Joe Rogan.
So images are going to be slightly distorted, like a carnival mirror. But even with a flatter lens, or the human eye, shadows are not parallel. Also, multiple light sources would cast multiple shadows. But the objects on the moon cast only one shadow.
Yeah, but everything in the shadow is supposed to be black because there's no light getting there.
Sure there is.
No, there isn't.
There is.
Agree to disagree.
The ambient light, or the fill light, is the moon itself. The soil on the surface of the moon is full of tiny beads of glass, and metal like aluminum and titanium. These are all highly reflective materials. So the moon's soil actually acts like trillions of tiny mirrors, bouncing the light back and filling in the shadows.
Yeah.
Well, ever go skiing on a sunny day?
Of course I have. I was an instructor in college.
You were... I don't want to get into that now. Anyway, you can get a pretty bad sunburn skiing. Not from the sun overhead, but by the sun reflecting off the snow. You could actually burn your cornea with reflected ultraviolet sunlight. It's called snow blindness. So shadows and multiple light sources, that's all debunked. Now, the same background theory might be my favorite, because it really defies explanation. Until we look more closely.
Oh.
The backgrounds do not line up perfectly. They're slightly off because the photos were taken pretty far apart. The hills in the distance look the same because they're the same. Those hills are miles away. But since there's no atmosphere on the moon... Well, since there's no water vapor on the moon... Okay, there's an atmosphere on the moon, but it's extremely thin compared to the Earth. It's called an exosphere, and it's made up of very small amounts of hydrogen, helium, and a few trace gases. And because there's no atmosphere, there's no haze. We evolved on Earth with a thick atmosphere, and one of the ways we determine distant objects is by how hazy they are. In other words, how...
We evolved on Earth. Did you hear that shit? This guy's a shill. Absolute shill. Oh, aliens are real, or whatever. But we definitely evolved. Darwin was right, and the Bible's wrong. NASA is trustworthy. Garbage. I'll probably unsubscribe after this.
How much of the atmosphere are we looking through? Now, on the moon, without haze, objects both near and far will feel close. It's an optical illusion.
Yeah, but where are the stars?
Right. The stars are there, you just can't see them.
A likely story.
Well, in order to take pictures of the moon, the camera's iris had to be almost completely closed and shutter speed turned way up. This is to let in as little light as possible. Otherwise, the brightness of the moon would wash everything out. Look how bright a full moon is. On a clear night, a full moon lights up everything, and it's 250,000 miles away. The astronauts are standing on that. It's bright. Even on Earth, if you're standing under a big spotlight at night, you're not going to see stars. The iris of your eye acts like the iris of a camera. The faint light of the stars just doesn't register. Watch a baseball game played under the lights. You don't see stars. Now, a lot of moon hoax evidence is cherry-picked, like the lack of a blast crater under the lunar module. There's no crater because the engine was turned off about 10 feet from the surface. The LEM just dropped the rest of the way. And without any wind to disturb, there's just not going to be a lot of...
What? What? See, I hate liars. I get the control of information, man. I get it. So I try to be very intellectually honest. It's very easy to control people. If you're charismatic and you know more than you've researched something, you can be very compelling. The official narrative now is that NASA it's easy to blast crater. Because, like, okay, a couple things. If you notice any of the arguments, can somebody please give me a little bit of props here? My arguments to Jorge haven't been addressed yet. I didn't bring up any of the things he's talking about because I know the issues. I know the stars. I know the angle of light. I didn't bring any of this up. I did bring up the blast crater. And his response is, oh, because 10 feet up, they've cut the engines. That's his response. And you believe that. Why? Why would you cut the engines 10 feet above? You just turn them off. Well, hey, guys, we got it from here. Gravity, pfft. These legs, we don't need them. I can do without them. I don't need legs. Just cut it off. Let's drop down because we don't want to make a blast crater. Don't lie to me. Listen to this.
See stars. The iris of your eye acts like the iris of a camera. The faint light of the stars just doesn't register. Watch a baseball game played under the lights. You don't see stars. Now, a lot of moon hoax evidence is cherry-picked, like the lack of a blast crater under the lunar module. There's no crater because the engine was turned off about 10 feet from the surface.
Whatever. Something about they were low on fuel or something. So they should cut the engines.
The LEM just dropped the rest of the way.
They just had enough gas, but they had to cut it off 10 seconds before because they got to land and they're really wanting to get home in time for dinner. What a story. It's fantastical.
And without any wind to disturb, there's just not going to be a lot of dust flying around. And where Apollo 11 touched down, the ground was hard soil. But other Apollo landings like Apollo 12 were pretty dusty. The lack of wind is also why the American flag doesn't move. Well, the aluminum rods are pretty springy, so the flag moves for quite a while after it's touched. But when it settles down, it doesn't move an inch. Oh, the camera that recorded the lunar module separating?
Remember what I said earlier? Controlled by Houston. Let's see if my fact checking is correct. Controlled by Houston with a pan.
That was operated remotely. The footprints don't...
Operated remotely. Again, I do my research on these things. When I make these stupid 1-minute videos, 3-minute videos, I've done 8, 10, 12 hours of research sometimes. It was operated remotely by a guy in Houston with a 5-second delay. Just matter of fact, it was operated remotely. Yeah, by who and how?
Match because the astronauts put on boot covers that have a different tread.
I said that earlier.
The temperatures are hot on the moon, but without an atmosphere to conduct heat, there's no convection. As long as things are colored bright white, they reflect most of the sun's energy pretty well. Heat wasn't an issue, not for the astronauts and not for the camera film. Now, there are many more examples, but I think you get the idea.
The camera film was white?
Every single one of those pieces of evidence can be explained. But hold on a second.
That wasn't me, that was the
Two
fish.
questions. Did NASA put men on the moon? Probably. Is NASA covering something up on the moon? Definitely.
Oh, here's the real conspiracy.
My name is Carl Wolf, and I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a
He's not going to go aliens.
crypto clearance. In mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. I couldn't repair it in the dark. I asked to have it removed. A airman second class was in the dark room at that time, and then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment and I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
I think the reason we haven't returned to the moon for 50 years is not because of a lack of interest or funding or the Van Allen radiation belts. I think we haven't gone back to the moon because of what was found up there. But that requires its own episode, and if you want to see it, let me know. Whatever is up there has been up there for a long, long time. And I think we can prove it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that's Hecklefish.
Hello, Governor.
This has been the Y-Files.
Where's Morsey? Morsey, are you here? Where's the chat on this? Where's the comments? I was just gonna really... Okay. Did you see how that ended, Morsey? Did I win? I'm competitive. You know what I didn't do? I wasn't bold enough there. I should have said... not only is he not going to do it, he's going to make it about aliens. I wasn't bold enough there. I don't watch a lot of content. People are always like, you got to watch this guy. You got to watch that guy. And I'm like, I don't want to. It's worse than we thought. They are who we thought they were. To recap, we evolved on the Earth a very long time ago. NASA is trustworthy. NASA is saving us from the aliens that are actually on the moon. There is a conspiracy. It's not that the government and the media and everyone, including that shill, are in on faking the moon landing. It's that there's aliens that they're hiding from you. And they're probably our creators, and they're definitely our saviors. And evolution definitely happened. And they are a product of evolution as well. The universe isn't empty. And eventually they're going to come visit us and show us that we've sinned against the Earth with climate change and take the very few who blindly trusted science with them to another planet and leave the rest of us here to ruin our disease-filled planet. Yes, MG, he didn't debunk any, like... Every one of the points that I brought up, he didn't address. And a couple that were actually decent ones, the screen, he didn't even touch. That screen was the only one that was, there was like that one, like one other one that was pretty good. He sucks. Meanwhile, just everybody in the world, like I was going to watch, I should have looked at the comments. Do you guys want to read the comments? I don't know. I'm already triggered. I did a video on the age of the Gospels that has 306. This is my view count. Let me move me. Here's my channel, my exposing NASA channel with content that's every bit the quality of that or close to it, anyways. 300 views, 400 views, 400 views, 600 views, 600 views. This is my reality. My good friend who's helping me with these thumbnails, he made a video, interviewed a guy in hell. He gets 30,000 views. He's been telling me, he looks at all my metrics that I'm shadow banned on YouTube. And he doesn't believe in shadow banning, but he's like, the metrics are there. Sharing and all these things. The Y-Files is a shill, okay? He's just a guy who is... spouting non-truth, who is absolutely in on it. maybe he wasn't initially, I don't know, backroom deal. I don't know how it started. But that was a biggest load of poison. I'm so upset right now. Let's read the comments from his sheep. I knew there was something wrong. Thanks for showing me that it wasn't this. There's going to be some people that are like, you're dead wrong about this one. Channel never gets old. You got to do an episode of what was found on the moon. Oh yeah, I'm so glad to know we went to the moon. You got to do an episode. Yep. My dad was a Navy phone guy. He did it. This guy is killing it. Super professional videos. Always funny, informative, always intriguing. I would love to see an episode on the moon. More like this, please. Badass storyteller. Yes, I want the story of the moon. We definitely want the episode on the moon structures. Thanks for the channel. This may be my favorite episode yet, and that's saying something. The first one of this video has had me stressed. The first half of the video. Amazing as always. Man, I just want to live in a reality where you can speak the truth and it's rewarded. But I tell you, that's not the reality we live in. We live in the one where Jesus spoke the truth and they killed him. And then all of his apostles told the truth about what they saw and they killed them. The truth isn't popular, and the people in charge hate the truth. And it really is hard for me as a rehabilitated conspiracy theorist who's onto the bigger conspiracy about them hiding the God of this reality from us. That it's a losing battle. You know, we can onesie twosies here and there, and the most compelling argument ever with Jorge that was entirely scientifically, philosophically accurate. Predict what this guy was going to do against, even people who I very much trust and love in here, and be right again. And I'm right, guys. We're right about this. God is real, and it's the God of the Bible, and Jesus loves you, and the world hates him. And they've used science and history and the media and NASA and they won't stop because the devil runs the world system. And Jesus had the opportunity to work for him. And he could have ran the world system. And he didn't. He said no, and now he is the ruler of all of reality and forever. He is the King of Kings. The devil's lies are passing and synthetic and built on a foundation of sand. And God is the truth. His word is the rock that the foundation of this reality is built on. What is that line about the people's hearts? They believed a truth. They believed a lie over the truth because of their hearts. 2 Peter 3. Because their evil desires, they believe that Jesus isn't coming, and that the earth wasn't created on earth and destroyed by the earth wasn't created on water and destroyed by water. That Somos guy that I debated last time I was on said, "Yeah, the earth was covered in water." And I said, "Yeah, it was the flood." And he's like, "No, it's not the flood." And I read Genesis, and I'm like, "Doesn't that sound like?" He's like, "No." Just he's the definition of 2 Peter 3. Anyways, we live another day to fight another day. God is good. All right, that's my closing. I don't know. You guys want me to do any more reaction videos? Let me know. I had a real weird health bout right before the live and almost didn't come on. So thankfully it cleared up, and I thought that was a good time. I got a notification that it was coming up, and I went, "Oh, cool, I'll do a reveal." But let me know if you guys want to do more stuff like that. Awesome, Pete. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, my friend. Truth wins, but you may not see it in your lifetime. Yeah. Yes, the human brain can heal itself. Absolutely. Aliens, sure. God, no way. How ironic. Amen. Please don't get discouraged. Yeah, no, I am discouraged. I'm sorry. I'll be okay, though. Why do they hate the truth so much? Because, funeral, it's a bright, shining light on their evil, dark ways and their evil, dark heart. And they'd rather run from it. Say it's not real than face it. For the same reason anyone would hate truth, funeral. Anyone would hate truth. Because they're lying. The truth invites inquisition. Lies perpetuate themselves on secrecy. Them's the breaks. Waking people up to the truth. Thank you, Truth Seeker. Yeah, it's... Please keep my family and myself and VOR in your prayers. Okay? A lot going on. So, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna get out of here, you guys. I've sufficiently bummed myself out enough to get to bed. Thank you guys for your prayers. It's amazing. I don't know how many people recover from the kidney thing that I had, and that was probably a miracle. So good to see you, sister. Glam, love you. Love you, Mike. Thanks. Love you guys. End transmission.
This shit looks like crap. If I tipped it over, then it would collapse. It looks like a piece of trash. Say it went to outer space, don't make me laugh. Big ass gap, like a big ass gap. It's a big ass gap.